Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, bringing you episode 163 here at the Tavern, presented by Hirotaku.com. Now, in the wake of the success of the original Power Rangers, there honestly weren't too many other companies out there trying to replicate or ape the success of that show. True, you had the tattooed teenage alien fighters from Beverly Hills, and you had the superhuman samurai cyber squad, but outside of those two examples, no other companies were really taking a chance on making live action superhero television shows. And of course, none of them were taking any other tokusatsu footage, other than Gridman, of course, to create these shows. And I think that's due in large part to the fact that Saban itself basically bought up all the rights to other tokusatsu and were making their own new creations based on the success of Power Rangers. Because for a period between 1994 and 1998, Saban created 5 live-action television series to basically ape the success of their own show. Now, whether they were doing this to, make a sister series, a companion piece, or a successor to the Power Rangers is really anybody's guess at this particular point. But no doubt, what they were doing is they were creating what I'm going to be dubbing the Sabanaverse. So basically, we have a sprawling universe of different characters and different shows that are loosely tied into each other and could be considered continuity with the Power Rangers. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit. But what I want to go ahead and do primarily is, well, not really give you guys a history lesson, but tell you what those 5 shows were, give you guys my overall thoughts on each of them, and how well I thought they were or how bad I thought they were. Now, of course, I have not seen these shows in forever, and I only did cursory research before going into this video, because I really just want to kind of give you guys my thoughts based on my actual memories of the shows and growing up. Because the truth is, I was totally in the Power Rangers, never left the franchise, I've been there since day one. And I try to get into these other shows because, they're like Power Rangers, and the Power Ranger VHS tapes were promoting them back in the day. So I'm like, okay, I'll go ahead and give these shows a shot. But for various reasons, I just couldn't get into them, despite things that I did like and things that I didn't like. So today, let's go ahead and talk about the 5 different shows that were part of the Sabanaverse. Now, of course, the first show up with the Sabanaverse was Cybertron. No, I'm just kidding. That was the pre-production name. It was actually later known as VR Troopers, as all of you actually know. Now, the interesting thing about VR Troopers in hindsight is that we know now that when Jason Frank left the Power Rangers, they wanted him to be the star of this brand new show, to be the star of Cybertron, as it was called when he was involved with it, because, again, he was so successfully popular in Power Rangers. Now, because Tommy was so popular in Power Rangers, they decided to just bring him back and make him the Green Ranger again, and that's worked wonders for his Power Rangers career primarily. But of course, VR Troopers was lacking the star power. All it really had going for it was that it was like Power Rangers, but to me, it wasn't enough like Power Rangers for me to get into it. The basic premise of the series is we got 3 heroes who don metal armor to fight an interdimensional warlord who's trying to take over the world through, I think it was like cyberspace, or what they thought was cyberspace at that time, because virtual reality was something that was like really big and popular, but was not really a thing. Like, I don't know what this virtual reality is that everybody keeps talking about, because I've never seen virtual reality. I don't know what it is. If it's supposed to be like this visor thing, I know the Virtual Boy, but what else is there that's virtual reality? I've been really confused on the concept since I first heard of it as a kid. Nevertheless, the show, to me, when I first saw it, it was like, it just wasn't interesting enough. And the footage... Okay, what we know now is they were using 3 different Metal Hero shows for each of the characters. Each character was based off a different Metal Hero from a different show. And because of that, they never actually worked together as a team, because they couldn't edit the footage in such a way that they were actually on screen at the same time. Much of the same way the second season of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, how They had the Zoo 2 footage of the monsters fighting the original Megazord, but they had to edit to where they were fighting the Thunder Megazord, so you never actually saw Zoo 2 monsters and Thunder Megazord on screen at the same time. Which, for Power Rangers, really wasn't bad because it was limited to the Zord footage, and you really didn't notice it as much as a kid. It's much more noticeable now as an adult. But for VR Troopers, it was definitely something very noticeable about it that was off at the time, that they never really interacted with each other on screen. And I think that's one of the big issues that series had, was that it was trying to cram way too much in there. They wanted to have a team of superheroes, but honestly, Super Sentai was the only team series that was available to them. Because again, you got the Metal Heroes shows, which were primarily with one hero in each particular show until you get later down the line. But again, we'll go ahead and talk about that. And of course, you couldn't do it with the Kamen Rider series because, well, again, one writer per show. It was only Super Sentai that had the team in there. So they took a bold step to integrate this footage, but in my mind, it just came out as messy, and it wasn't visually appealing either. I mean, look at the costumes for these guys. I'm sure if it was a singular hero, it would be alright, it would be decent, but when you actually take three of them and put them together, it just really looks like a jumbled mess. I guess the way my mind operates, I like to think I'm a creative person, but I do like order in some fashion. I'd like to be able, like the thing about the mind from Power Rangers and the Power Rangers in general is that you have five Rangers, they all look identical but with variations on their costumes, knowing that they're part of a unified whole. That's why it's called a uniform. What we have here is we have three different superheroes that are artificially being put together, but they're not actually working together in any significant means. Um, so it's just something I really couldn't get into, that I just really wasn't interested in. And I think they really did try hard to push this. Simply because, again, every VHS had an advertisement for them. Apparently, there was a Genesis game, a Game Gear game. But it just never caught on for whatever reason. And honestly, I don't remember too much about the show other than the Brad Hawkins character, Ryan Steele, which is a pretty cool name. Just complaining about his father all the time. It's like, I miss my father, I miss my dad, which is something apparently they never resolved in the show. And I don't remember the other characters. I think in the first season they had a Sea Captain character, then replaced him with Mr. Miyagi. And then they decided that it would be great to have a talking dog in the show, and again, what's that about? I think the show would have done better if Jason Frank did come over, but I do think it would have been a lot better had it been Tommy Oliver as the character. Keep in mind that the character of Ryan Steele is described as an orphan within the VR Troopers show. And what is Tommy, as we eventually find out? I think we find out around Zeo, he's an orphan as well. So it's entirely possible that you could have put that in there, saying that, okay, this is Tommy, he's no longer a Power Ranger, now he's going to be a new superhero, and he's going to go ahead and try and find his birth father. And I think that would have been a great premise for a show, and that certainly would have gotten more people over there, but I guess they wanted Jason Frank to stay on Power Rangers because, his star was rising, and that's what was going to keep him in there. I don't know what letter writing campaign anybody did to keep Tommy on the show, but I guess it's to the benefit of Power Rangers and the detriment of VR Troopers, but again, VR Troopers just really wasn't anything that special in my mind. The next series that they did was The Masked Rider. Now, of course, what was very unique about this is that the first three episodes of the third season of Power Rangers, which for some reason I always thought was the last three episodes of the second season, but that's because they were using the Thunderzords, became a backdoor pilot for The Masked Rider. Now, the premise is great, and kind of what they were going for in the Power Ranger three-parter was good. You have an alien planet that's already under alien control, but by an evil, I think, Count Dragon, and it's about a resistance fighter who's trying to get his home back. And the Power Rangers get involved, and because the Power Rangers get involved, Count Dragon's basically like, I'm going to stop the Power Rangers because I hate them now for ruining all my plans, and goes after them. And the Master Rider's got to follow along to help the Rangers to fight Count Dragon. And that's the premise that you get from watching these three episodes. But for some reason, they decide to, in the first episode, to completely excise anything Power Rangers related to Masked Rider, which, again, I think is detrimental to the show because you have to have that Power Ranger connection. Um, continuity is kind of a big thing here. We're going to talk at the end, but it's just kind of odd that you introduce the character in Power Rangers, have his own show that I think premiered a few weeks after his initial premiere in Power Rangers, and you just want to forget his introduction and say that this is the same character, because the Masked Rider from the Power Rangers and the Masked Rider in the Masked Rider show are really two different characters because their origins are significantly different. And that always kind of bugged me when I first saw it, because I did watch the first couple of episodes. I was like, what about the Power Rangers? Wasn't the whole point that the Power Rangers were going here? So that was kind of a small deal for me. I think the bigger deal for me is that it just wasn't a good series because, again, what was the Power Ranger episode about? About an alien rebellion trying to claim back their world. If you make that into a television series, that's great. That's gold. That's exactly what I would want to go ahead and watch from a television show. But instead, they do the whole Superman thing where he goes down to Earth and he's found by a family, and they're going to raise him and take care of him and nurture him and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sorry, but I don't want to see about an alien prince who gets mixed up in suburbia and try to keep his secret identity while trying to save the world. I mean, he's the frickin' prince of a conquered planet. Don't you think that he would, maybe go to the government, especially if Dragon's trying to invade and conquer and stuff? So, my world was attacked and all that. I'm here to help the government. I'm here to help people of Earth, to save the people of Earth. That would have been a much more interesting premise, but they took it and made it so boring. Because it was boring. And that's why I think they had to introduce the character of Furbus. Now, Furbus is not the worst thing in the world, but what was the point? Seriously, what was the point of Furbus? Why did we need this little Furby character out there doing weird stuff? I think I remember there was an episode where Furbus became a giant and he had to deal with that. I mean, come on. Come on. And one thing that also really gets me nowadays, because it tells you they were trying way, way too hard. Because Dex joins up with the Stewart family, and it's funny because the father is white, the mother is Asian, the daughter is white, and the son, they have an adopted son who's black. I'm sorry, but they were really trying way too hard with that. And the natural daughter, at least I assume she's natural. I don't know if she was adopted or not, uh, but she doesn't look half anything. And she's a cheerleader or something, and it's just like, the only good thing that was great about the family is Candace Kita. That was the mother, because now she is super hot. Go look her up online. She's super hot. I'm like, wow, that she was on Masked Rider. I think her only other major appearance after Masked Rider was in I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry, where she plays Hooters Girl. So her career is taken off, obviously. Um, The villains were not very interesting. I think the only thing that was interesting in the show was probably the talking car motorcycle, but beyond that, I just couldn't get into it. I don't know what else to say, folks. It wasn't that interesting of a show. They had an interesting character in Dex and an interesting backstory, but they decided to play it safe and, turn into the Coneheads in a way without good comedy. Although Dan Aykroyd as a Masked Rider, that would be pretty cool. I would love to go ahead and see that. Okay, the next one is the big one, no pun intended, but the Big Bad Beetleborgs, or Beetleborgs Metallics. Now, the funny thing about this was about the time that Power Rangers was changing over from the Mighty Morphin era into the Zeo era. And my brother actually kind of lost interest in Power Rangers with the Zeo era because he just didn't really enjoy it as much as I did. So when Big Bad Beetleborgs came on, to him, that was the alternative. Oh, I don't have to watch Beetleborgs because, I don't have to watch Power Rangers because now I have Beetleborgs. So that was his show for the 2 years that it was on, although he eventually got out of all that stuff completely, unlike his brother, who's still into it. Okay, so Beetleborgs, that was a lot better than VR Troopers in the sense that it was an actual team. They were using tokusatsu footage, but this time they had Metal Hero footage of all the characters together because they were a unified team. Because three characters, armored bugs, red, blue, green. Easy to follow. I think that was great. They had their own Zords, just like the Power Rangers. They were, tanks basically, but hey, they were still cool. I liked that. But what I didn't particularly enjoy then, and I still don't like now, was the fact that they were children. Now I get the Power Rangers were going for the whole teenage and young adult, young adult audience, but going for the child audience to me was always dubious at best. It just didn't really click for me that these kids were in these armored forms. And this is obviously a precursor to Justin. And I guess somebody thought, well, it worked for Beetleborgs, maybe we can do it for Justin, which, as we know, didn't turn out that well. Um, yeah, I just didn't like the idea of there was kids that was involved with this. I would have liked to have seen something a little bit more serious because I think you had with Power Rangers, you had the comedy and everything, sure, but I think if you took Beetleborgs in a more serious direction, make it young adults, make it teenagers, I think it could have worked a little bit better. But the actors themselves weren't bad, and I didn't really have a problem with it. I like the idea that it was based on a real comic book, and that's where they get their weapons and their villains come from, because it's a clever way of doing that. What I did not like also was the whole Hillhurst Mansion thing where they live in a haunted, where they don't live, but they go visit a haunted house out in the middle of nowhere in California. And the house is basically populated by comic relief Universal monsters. I didn't like any of them. Frankie was okay once in a while, but you always felt that half the episode was dedicated to what the Hillhurst monsters were up to, and the other half was dedicated to what the Beetleborgs were up to. And of course, what the Beetleborgs were doing were a lot more interesting than what the Hillhurst monsters were doing. I kind of wish they only had Flabber, because he was fine, he was funny at times, and just excised all the others. Kind of strip it down. That's something that I would say about Beetleborgs. It had a lot of other stuff going on that it didn't need to have going on. It only needed to have the main characters, the supporting characters maybe at the comic book store, and Flabber and the villains. That's all I really thought it particularly needed. Um, I did like when they did the Metallics transition. Well, first of all, I like the Schalborg arc where they have to invent a new character to come in, and they actually get Art Fortunes, the guy who draws the comic books and writes them, to come up with a new hero to fight them. I like how the villains thought outside of the box and made their own evil Beetleborg. I thought that was pretty cool. And the monsters in the first season I thought were a lot more interesting. They were comic relief villains, but I thought they were a little bit better than the more menacing villains of the second season, which I know is kind of odd, saying that I wanted to be more serious, but for what it was, I did like the first season villains, and the second season villains were okay. The transition to Metallics was great. They get their powers destroyed, so what they gotta do? Just draw up some new ones, which I think is kind of great because in most of those, it's always seek a new power source or devise your own weapons and come up with all this new stuff. When it's just go find the artist and have him draw stuff, and we can use this guy's magic to bring everything to life. I really like that. I like the Astroborg saga. I like the idea that there's a rivalry between Art and Less Fortune, which, man, I feel pretty bad for Less Fortune, because he was basically placed in that role because his parents named him that. The Boron stuff was pretty cool because they got their own, Megazord eventually. Boron and Roboborg. Boron was, at the end of the series. Um, Something odd about the show that I never really understood is like every time the monsters would show up around normal civilians, they would scare them to the fact that their pants would fall down and you would see their underwear. And I know this is like an old cartoon kind of gag, from the Tex Avery era or something, but it just didn't really do it for me. And I have to ask this question because I'm sorry, but it's a legitimate question that I have not gotten an answer to. Why is it that all the people whose pants dropped in the Beetleborgs were men wearing boxer shorts? Now, come on. Why couldn't there be at least one woman there and we got to see her panties? And, I don't know it's all right to see a guy in boxer shorts on television, but not all right to see a woman in panties on television. What's the logic there? I don't get it. Somebody, please give me a legitimate answer, not some BS answer. Give me a real answer to why that is. Why didn't we see the women get scared? Or are you saying that all men are cowards? Is there some feminist agenda in the series? I don't know. I just thought that was. I never understood that. I never got that. Now, honestly, I think Beetleborgs could have survived a third season or even further, could have continued. But here's the weird thing, is that the show didn't really get canceled as much as they just kind of quit. Because, get this, for the first season, they ran out, they used all the footage from Kabuto B-Fighter, or B-Fighter Kabuto, I forget which one, in the first season. Then they used up all the footage for the second season, and it's very obvious towards the end where they give them new toyetic armor as opposed to using the standard weapons that they already have. But they didn't have anything to go off on for the third season because they exhausted all their footage, which to me is just it's just kind of stupid if you think about it. If you exhausted all your footage, then A, go to the producers like you did before for the Zoo 2 footage and ask for them to go ahead and make more exclusively for the Beetleborg franchise. Or two, and here's a novel concept, film your own footage. See, this is something that kind of bothers me is like, what if Super Sentai had ended with O Ranger and Car Ranger was never around or something? Or that, Zoo Ranger was going to be the last season or whoever, whatever. If Power Rangers would have ended, or if Sentai had ended, that means Power Rangers are going to end because the production team is not interested, for whatever reason, in filming new footage. And here's a historical precedent. They had no new footage to use for Beetleborgs, so they said, all right, we quit, no more, that's it. Despite the fact that it was popular and it actually was interesting. So, I don't know, folks. I would have liked to have seen it continue on. Obviously, a couple of story threads that were dropped and we never got a resolution to, such as did Drew ever get with Heather? I think that was his love interest. Whatever happened to Les Fortunes when he left? What was the big deal going on there? Anyway, this would actually be. I would honestly love to see this series come back and do a 20 years later. What happened to the kids with nobody else to fight and all this power? What did they end up doing? I think that would have been an interesting story to go into, something really great to explore. All right, now we have moved out of adapting tokusatsu footage, and now we are adapting the Ninja Turtles. So yes, beginning in 1997, the Ninja Turtles got a live-action television series called Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation. Now, I would certainly say it was ambitious at the time. They got the rights and they were going to do live action Ninja Turtles, which to me does seem logical because, heck, you got Power Rangers, and who did the Power Rangers supplant in popular culture but the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? You have the animatronics, you have the set from the second movie, and you just have a lot of things going for you. The problem is that they made a lot of weird choices that I just don't think paid off. And I don't know if they were making those choices to be clever and differentiate itself from other continuities, or if they just had to do it for whatever reason. Case in point, the Shredder appears only in 2 episodes of the entire series. Now, we know in the Mirage comics, Shredder was not very important. It was because of James Avery in the 1987 series that he became popular. Thus, he became the popular villain for the first and second films. And as we know now, pretty much if you don't have the Shredder, a lot of people don't know what to do with the Ninja Turtles with him being his villain. And this series is a perfect example of it. They get rid of the Shredder and they introduce a bunch of new villains that really just didn't work. I mean, they got the Rank, which is these dragons from China, who I never really got into. There was the gangster gorilla for some reason. I don't remember his name at the moment. I think the only villain that I actually liked from the show was Bone Steel, but that's only because he was just certified psychotic and fun to go ahead and watch. But it's kind of odd that they invented all these new villains for the show instead of bringing in villains from the comics like Muckman or Leatherhead or the Rat King or any of those guys. It was just kind of odd that they would, create all these new characters. For what reason, I'm not sure. Because the consensus has been for a number of people is that the Ninja Turtles Next Mutation does take place in an alternate universe separate from the three live action films, but it does have traces of the live action films in there. They didn't obviously use the animatronics for the show, they're brand new animatronics. But even though you're making new continuity, here's the thing with the '03 series, or yeah, it was the '03 series and the 2012 series, they at least incorporated some of the villains from the comics and the other shows in there while creating new characters of their own. Because while the 2012 did create Dog Pound and Fish Face, they still have Bebop and Rocksteady and Baxter Stockman and Karai. And actually, considering that the first two episodes was getting rid of the Shredder and disbanding the Foot Clan, which was so easy because all Leo had to do was get a microphone and say, "Hey, we defeated the Shredder. It's over. Go home now." Wouldn't this be a great way to bring Karai into the series? That would have been interesting. But they also get rid of characters like April O'Neil and Casey Jones, which you have two human characters that don't require any type of prosthetic, and yet you don't have them at all. I mean, this is the only interpretation of Turtles I know of that doesn't involve April in some capacity. I mean, why did you bring in a mobster gorilla and a dragon clan, and of course vampires later on, which obviously was going to be very expensive, when you could have just brought in human characters like April and Casey? Now, of course, what this show is most notable for is the introduction of the character Venus, the female turtle. Now, I want to go off a little tangent here about Ninja Turtles because it just really bugs me the hate that people have for this character. She wasn't especially interesting, I'll tell you that. Her magic did seem out of place, and the fact that she has a Chinese origin, despite that the Turtles have a Japanese origin, justified because she went down to Chinatown, as the lyrics say. And believe it or not, that is a catchy theme song. I do like that. Here are just two things that I want to go ahead and point out about the Venus turtle that I think is interesting and could work. Now, the first point being that one of the things about the turtles mythos that nobody really seems to comment on is the idea that the turtles are unique creations. They are the only ones of their kind in the world. Sure, you got Slash and the punk frogs and all that, but there is a sense of loneliness to the Ninja Turtles, to their existence. Because here's the thing: when they're gone, if they die in battle or die naturally or whatever and stuff, that's it. There are no more Ninja Turtles in the world. They are the only ones of their race. They are the last sons of Krypton, basically. What you get with having Venus in there is the possibility of a continued legacy and lineage of the Ninja Turtles. That because she's female and they are male, that you could propagate your own Ninja Turtle race. Now, there are a number of stories you can tie into that, as not so much like fatherhood or anything like that for the turtles, but there is the chance of telling about stories of growing up for the next generation, the world that we leave them, and things like that. There's a lot of different things you could really tell by having a female turtle and introducing into the equation the possibility of more Ninja Turtles through reproduction, which is something the series didn't go into. Now, it got there close because, and we're going to the second part, is because all the turtles seem to have the hots for her in the show. So it's introduced early on by Leonardo that none of the turtles are biological brothers. That they're all turtles, but they're not from the same mother. And that sounds dubious given that they were born in a pet shop, and where the odds you get 5 different turtles who are not in some way related. But this really pissed a lot of people off, and frankly, I don't know why. Because here's the thing. One of the things that the first movie taught us is that you can still be a family without being biologically connected. Look at it for a second. Splinter is a rat. He considers the turtles his sons. Shredder, who is the dark side of this equation, is manipulating the youth of New York and saying that he is the father and that they are all his children, and if they are family, they're going to protect each other. If you can sum up the very first Ninja Turtles movie in a single word, it is family. But it never really dawned on me to think that the four turtles were biologically related, because the theme of that film and the theme about Ninja Turtles in terms of family is it's a non-conventional family. You have Splinter, the father. You have the four turtles. You have April as the surrogate mother. It's non-traditional. It's not that nuclear family that you're used to. So for them to introduce the fact that they're not actually biological brothers, and of course by extension Venus is not a biological sister, I'm fine with that. That to me doesn't bother me at all, because where was it ever important in either the films or the TV shows that they were biological brothers and that was essential to the story? I mean, heck, Bay took so many liberties with, his interpretation of the Ninja Turtles that people got pissed off, but not as pissed off as not making the Turtles brothers. I don't get that. It's just, it's odd that people would get upset about that. And all coming from this female turtle. And apparently there's a rule in Ninja Turtle comics and whatnot that you can't have a female turtle. Even in the shows, no female turtles are allowed. But here's the thing, if you're going to do that, keep that loneliness aspect of their existence, because if you don't do it, then what's the point of not having the female turtle if you're not going to explore the only thing you can explore with that concept? As for the show itself, it was okay. I just wish that they would have had more of the characters that we were aware of. I wish they would have gotten rid of some of the villains. Again, the rank was not particularly interesting. You could have done stuff with it, but they just seem to really limit themselves. Not to mention, what's actually kind of odd is that they filmed a lot of that stuff at night, which is the opposite to Power Rangers, because of course Power Rangers was all filmed during daytime footage. Ninja Turtle stuff was all filmed in the evening, I guess to mask the fact that they weren't really in New York City. And also, why did they replace the Turtle van with a Humvee? It's actually great that Lightspeed Rescue got that Humvee later on for their series, but all Michelangelo did with it was ride out and do his own pirate radio broadcast. I'm not sure why, but that was a thing that they did. So again, not too much to really say about that, other than probably what I've already said about the crossover with Power Rangers, and again, we'll get into the continuity aspect here in a second. Now, the final show that came out, which I think this was the most ambitious one that they did, was The Mystic Knights of Tir na Nog. I mean, what a concept. It's a show about, Irish mythology based in ancient Ireland that's swords and sorcery. And they actually filmed the damn show in Ireland. I mean, how often does that even happen? And they didn't even have any tokusatsu footage to go off on. They did everything brand new. This was Saban's first attempt at a franchise that had no adaptation from a Japanese source, didn't have another franchise which they were adapting to their own show. This was completely their own thing, and the only thing they had for reference was Irish mythology, which, frankly, I know nothing about Irish mythology, and it just seems so cool based on this show. I think looking back from what I remember, it does look a little cheap. It doesn't look very authentic in the time that it's representing. And of course, I think in the second season they introduce a car that shoots logs as one of the primary weapons. But other than that, I really thought this was kind of an interesting show and had an interesting premise, because they also had like this duality thing going on, because they had the four heroes and four knights that were direct bad guys who were subservient to our main villain, Queen Maeve, who I always thought was kind of an interesting villain too. I thought the villains in the show were good. And then they didn't have Zords, but they had their own dragon, and the villains had a Hydra. That's freaking awesome too. And actually, one of the things I always thought was really interesting is that the whole series is the backdrop that there is a war going on between two nations, and the backdrop of war is constantly happening. And I remember the opening to one episode where this soldier, the second command, the guy with the ram horn and the eye patch, whose name I am not remembering at the moment, basically goes onto this field of dead soldiers, and he's just like, "Ha! They couldn't stand us. We're great. We're so great." And then halfway through his walk, they all jump up and attack the army. They were playing possum, and I'm like, that is so cool. That's something you would not see in any other show. I really don't have much else to say about this other than you just have to admire the show for its ambition. Now, the only reason it got canceled is because Power Rangers was popular again, and they pretty much put all their budget in the Power Rangers Lost Galaxy. And of course, Lost Galaxy turned out very well because of that, but of course, to the detriment of the Mystic Knights. So that's basically everything that Saban did in live action after Power Rangers. Again, 3 shows adapted from other tokusatsu shows, a Ninja Turtles TV show, and something of their very own creation that had no basis in anything else. Now, I suspect at some point that these shows were meant to tie into Power Rangers directly, indirectly, in some way, much like the Marvel Cinematic Universe or what they're doing with the television shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Daredevil, Jessica Jones. Now, in the case of VR Troopers, I think it's obvious they were bringing Tommy over, but not making it Tommy. But they easily could have done that, and maybe that was something from the get go they were thinking. Hey, let's bring Tommy over, and we tie in the Power Rangers, so we have 2 teams that are going out there. Masked Rider was obviously tied in the Power Rangers when it first came out. There was a crossover between Ninja Turtles and the Power Rangers in space. And there's no reason to believe that Mystic Knights couldn't have taken place in the ancient past because, again, they never traveled to the future. It's always taking place in ancient Ireland. So it could be tied into continuity. And as we've seen in Power Rangers, the Beetleborgs are actual comics that Bulk and Skull were reading in Power Rangers Turbo. So there is a loose association to say that, hey, that this is a true Sabanaverse. That this is a universe of populated Saban characters that extend to more than just the Power Rangers themselves. And I wish they would have explored that more. Was Shell Shocked interesting? Yeah. Was it good? No. Would it have been great to see the Ninja Turtles get involved with more Power Ranger stuff, or the Power Rangers get involved in Ninja Turtles? Absolutely. Because something you have to go ahead and think about. When Countdown to Destruction took place, they're attacking the entire world, not just Angel Grove. And I would love to have seen a shot of the Ninja Turtles in New York fighting off Quantrons and Pirantrons. Wouldn't that have been awesome? That's something they totally could have done because it was still on the air and they only had to take like 5 minutes to film it, and there you go. You got the Ninja Turtles helping to protect the world as well. Beetleborgs, the same case. You could have done that. They chose not to. And I don't know why they never crossed over with the Power Rangers. There was a comic book where I believe it was Power Rangers Turbo crossed over with Beetleborgs Metallics, but beyond that, they never officially crossed over. And you think that would be the logical thing for them to do. 1 hour television special or a special episode of Mighty Morphin Power, or excuse me, special episode of Power Rangers Zeo featuring the Big Bad Beetleborgs or vice versa. One of the things they actually do with Star Trek that's actually interesting is up until Enterprise, what they were doing with the new shows, Next Gen, DS9, and Voyager, is they would have a character from the previous series come over to essentially give their blessing to the new series. So, in the first episode of Next Gen, we have DeForest Kelley appearing as Dr. McCoy and talking to Data. Again, one generation to the next. And what we had for Deep Space Nine is in the first 2 episodes, we had Captain Picard giving Sisko his orders on what to do with Bajor and Deep Space Nine. And then in Voyager, we actually had set at Deep Space Nine, and Quark shows up to try and con Harry, and Tom saves him from it. And that's something they really could have done with these shows, is have the Power Rangers show up to essentially give their blessing, like, yes, here is Masked Rider, now go ahead and enjoy it, or here's the Ninja Turtles, go ahead and enjoy it. And I would actually like to see in the future Power Ranger productions trying to tie in some of these shows into the mythology. And it doesn't have to be anything big, because We could have a news report talk about mysterious activity in New York that's been going on for 30 years or however long. You can have Beetleborgs comic books show up with Dino Thunder talking about, oh, they're doing another reboot, we better get the new event comic or something. VR Troopers, Mass Rider, you can bring those up in whatever context. And heck, you know what? If we ever get another series that's similar to Operation Overdrive, where they talk about the past and ancient relics and all that, how easy is it to name drop Tirnanog in there? Because what was that whole thing about, again, the dragon scale from Fireheart for the Defender vest in Operation Overdrive? How easy could that have been Pyre, from Mystic Knights, saying this is from an ancient dragon in the land of Tirnog in Ireland. Wouldn't that have just been awesome? Because you can do this without having the characters in there. And Saban has the rights to all these because they got them back. So there's no reason why they can't do this. Alright, so those are my thoughts on the Sabanaverse as a whole. I would say the series that I watched the most was probably Big Bad Beetleborgs. The series I liked the least was Masked Rider. But the series I was probably most disappointed in was Ninja Turtles because of, heck, once you watch the 1987 show, it's really hard to top that, although the 2012 show seems to be doing that. And I certainly would have liked to have seen more of all these shows to better refine it. And any number of these shows could make a comeback today, again, as a companion series, Power Rangers, and especially with the digital media platforms with Netflix. You could totally do a sequel to Beetleborgs. You could totally do a sequel to Mass Riot. You can totally do a sequel to VR Troopers. Try it out. Do a 13-episode run. See what people think about it. And go from there. All right, but you got everybody out there. What was your favorite show? What was your least favorite show? And what do you think about a unified Sabanaverse? Is it something worth exploring in the future to, tie all these shows together? Or are all these shows in your mind outside of continuity? What do you guys think? Leave me a comment below and let me know. Otherwise, I want to thank you guys for listening. Have a good evening. And the tavern is now closed.